Welcome back, everybody. Today's deep dive is going to be, well, kind of mind-blowing, to be honest.
Oh, intriguing. I'm ready. Lay it on me.
We're looking at the link between wonder, wisdom, and, get this, inner peace. And we're using ancient Indian philosophy as our guide.
Right up my alley. Where are we starting?
We've got an excerpt from an audio lecture on, wait for it, the Shiva Sutras.
Wow, the Shiva Sutras. Okay, you have my attention.
These are verses believed to be revealed by the Hindu deity Shiva himself. Pretty fascinating stuff. This lecture, by the way, is titled OSHVS 03 Shiv Sutra 03.AMR. And right off the bat, it dives into this idea that there are, get this, two types of amazement.
Two types. Okay, I'm curious. Put it down for me.
All right, so you've got Vismaya, which is wonder, and Acharya, which means awe.
Wonder and awe. So what's the difference?
The lecture uses some really vivid imagery, which I love. Imagine a scientist dissecting a frog, really getting in there.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
That's awe. It's like marveling at how complex it all is, wanting to understand how it works. It's all about exploring outward, breaking things down,
Right, kind of like taking something apart to see how the pieces fit.
Exactly. But then picture closing your eyes and going inward, like through meditation. You're experiencing the mystery of your own being.
Okay, yeah, that's a totally different feeling.
And that, my friend, is wonder. It's a journey into the unknown. But here's the thing. It actually deepens the mystery instead of solving it.
I see. So it's about embracing the mystery rather than trying to eliminate it.
You got it. It's almost like science, which is born out of awe, wants to explain away the mystery.
Right, it tries to make sense of things, categorize them, put them in neat little boxes.
While spirituality, fueled by wonder, leans into the mystery, it uses it as a catalyst for inner exploration. It's like approaching the same unknown from completely different directions.
That's a great point. It's like two sides of the same coin.
It really is. And you know what? It reminded me of a story from the lecture about Mullah Nasruddin, that wise, witty Sufi figure.
Oh, I love Mullah Nasruddin's stories. Always so insightful.
Right. So in this story, someone asks him about his, well, let's just say his fondness for a certain beverage.
Oh, okay. I'm listening.
And Nasruddin, being the clever fellow he is, replies with a question of his own.
Oh, a question with a question. Classic Nasruddin. What does he ask?
He asks, is this an inquiry or an invitation?
Whoa. That's deep.
Right. It's a humorous way of pointing to the difference between analyzing something from a detached perspective, like an inquiry, versus welcoming it into your experience, like an invitation.
I see. It's about how we choose to approach the unknown.
It really is. And speaking of approaching the unknown, the lecture goes on to emphasize the importance of rediscovering something that we tend to lose as we grow up. That childlike sense of wonder, that pure, unadulterated curiosity about the world around us.
Oh, you mean that innocent awe that makes everything seem magical?
Exactly. It's like we're born with this natural sense of wonder, but somewhere along the way, we start to lose it.
It's true, isn't it? Life gets in the way and we become more jaded, less curious.
And the lecture uses a beautiful example to illustrate this. A child asking, why are trees green?
Oh, yeah, that classic question that stumps every adult.
Right. We might be tempted to rattle off a scientific explanation about chlorophyll and photosynthesis.
Yeah, all that technical stuff.
But the lecture tells this really interesting story about the writer D.H. Lawrence. He was walking with a child who asked that very question, and instead of offering a textbook answer, you know what he said.
What did he say?
He simply replied, it's a mystery. He saw the beauty in accepting the unknown and allowing wonder to spark genuine curiosity.
Wow. That's a powerful reminder to just embrace the mystery instead of always trying to explain it away.
I know, right? It makes you think about when was the last time you felt that genuine sense of wonder, that willingness to just be in awe of something without needing to explain it.
I'm thinking.
For many of us, it's easy to get stuck in a know-it-all mindset.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We think we have it all figured out.
But this lecture suggests that rediscovering that childlike wonder, that openness to the unknown, is actually the first step on the path to inner peace.
Okay, that's got me hooked. What comes next on this path?
Well, hold on to your hats, because the lecture introduces this concept called Swapad Shakti, which translates to power in stillness.
Swapad Shakti. Power in stillness. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's this idea that true strength and energy come not from constantly chasing after things, but from dwelling in the stillness of our own being.
So it's not about outward action, but about finding that quiet space within ourselves.
Yes, exactly. The lecture uses this really striking analogy to explain it. Imagine a leaky bucket being constantly filled from a well.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
No matter how much water you pour in, it keeps leaking out.
Right, because it's got holes.
And this, get this, represents our energy being depleted by constantly chasing external things.
Or,
We're always trying to fill that bucket, but it never seems to stay full.
wow, I felt that. It's that feeling of always striving, always needing more, never quite feeling satisfied.
It is, isn't it? And the lecture invites us to, well, shift our perspective.
Shift it how?
Instead of being the leaky bucket, what if we could become the well itself?
The well itself, what do you mean?
The source of boundless energy,
Mhm.
That's the power of Swapat Shakti, finding that deep reservoir of strength and peace within.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of this, but how do we do that? How do we go from being that leaky bucket to becoming the well?
That's the million-dollar question. Is there something, a technique or practice we can do, to tap into that inner wellspring?
That's where Vitark comes into play.
Vitark. Okay, another new term.
Don't worry, it might sound a bit technical, but it basically translates to special reasoning or discernment. And according to the lecture, it's the key to unlocking that inner stillness and finding that Swapat Shakti we were talking about.
Okay, so we have wonder, stillness, and now this idea of Vitark. I'm seeing a pattern here, but I'd love to understand how it all fits together. Could you tell me a bit more about this Vitark?
Think about how much mental energy we waste, on overthinking and analyzing and worrying.
Yeah, we all do it, right?
Vitark is about, well, shifting those mental gears. Instead of dissecting and analyzing, it's about synthesis, about focusing inward and finding a sense of wholeness.
So it's not about suppressing thoughts or ignoring feelings, but rather using a different kind of reasoning, a more inward-focused approach to find clarity and peace.
You got it. It's like using a different tool for the job.
Yeah.
And the lecture has this really great story about this Sufi mystic Farid,
I think so, yeah.
Someone offered him a gift of golden scissors. They thought it was valuable and useful. Imagine that. A beautifully crafted golden scissor.
I can, and it sounds pretty impressive.
Right. But Farid politely declined the gift. He requested a needle and thread instead.
Interesting. Why a needle and thread?
He explained that he was in the business of mending, weaving things together, not cutting them apart.
Whoa, that's powerful. The golden scissors represent that analytical, dissecting way of thinking, while the needle and thread symbolize the power of Vitark to, mend our inner world and create wholeness.
Exactly. The lecture goes on to explain how Vitark, this special reasoning, is different from Tark, which is ordinary logic, and Kutark, which is fallacious reasoning. Those tend to be more outward focused.
I see.
While Vitark guides us inward, leading us towards deeper self-knowledge.
So it's like we have these different mental tools, and Vitark is the one that helps us mend our inner world, connect those fragmented pieces, and find that sense of wholeness that ultimately leads to true happiness.
You're right on the money. It's about shifting our focus from the external to the internal, recognizing that lasting happiness comes from within, not from chasing external things. And that brings us to the heart of this deep dive. Lokanda Samadhi Sukham. It's a phrase that describes the bliss of simply existing.
The bliss of simply existing.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a glimpse of what this is about. So it's not about seeking happiness in external achievements or possessions, but rather discovering the joy that's already present within us.
Precisely. The lecture contrasts those fleeting conditional pleasures of the world, the ones that are always tied to some form of suffering, with the unconditional joy of just being.
Can you give me an example of that contrast? I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Sure. Think about something as basic as quenching your thirst. The pleasure of drinking water is tied to the discomfort of being thirsty, right?
You don't appreciate the water unless you're thirsty.
It's like we're constantly chasing after something, trying to get away from something else, which creates this endless cycle.
The cycle of wanting and aversion.
You got it. But the joy of existence, of simply being present in this moment, that's free from that cycle. And to illustrate this, the lecture shares this really poignant anecdote about a gambler.
A gambler. Okay, I'm all ears.
So this gambler, he lost everything, in a game of chance.
Oh, that's tough. I'd be devastated.
But here's the thing. Instead of being devastated, he felt a sense of peace. He realized that none of those material possessions he lost were truly his to begin with.
It was all temporary, right?
Exactly. And that realization freed him from the suffering of loss.
That's a profound way to look at it.
Yeah,
It reminds me of the saying, you can't take it with you when you go.
you got it. And the lecture suggests that by letting go of our attachment to things, to outcomes, even to our sense of self, we can tap into this deeper, more profound dimension of happiness. It's not about seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, but finding a state of being that transcends both.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. So to recap, the 4 key steps on this path to inner peace, as outlined in the lecture, are cultivate wonder, find stillness, practice discernment, and experience the joy of existence.
Beautifully summarized.
Yeah.
But it's not just a linear process, is it? These elements are all interconnected.
Right. It's not like checking boxes off a list.
Exactly. They build on each other. It's more like a dance than a straight line.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, right? It's not about reaching a final destination, but about embracing this process of self-discovery.
You nailed it. And that's what we'll be exploring further in our next deep dive. Stay tuned.
This has been so insightful already. And you know what? It's making me think, if worldly pleasures always come with a price, you know, that bit about suffering we talked about, what might truly unconditional joy feel like? And how can we even begin to explore this deeper happiness within ourselves?
Those are wonderful questions, and perhaps that's where the real journey begins. It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about happiness, right?
It does. I mean, we're practically programmed to think happiness depends on things outside of us. You know, stuff we got to achieve or circumstances we got to be in.
Totally. Our jobs, relationships, what we own, even the weather. It's like we're always waiting for that perfect scenario.
Like, I'll finally be happy when, and then we fill in the blank.
But what if the Shiva Sutras are right? What if true, lasting joy is like an inside job?
I mean, that's what this lecture seems to be suggesting, right? So how do we shift our focus? How do we even find that swapad shakti, that power and stillness, when life's so hectic?
I think it starts with just being aware, noticing how often we're pulled in a million directions by all our desires and worries.
Yeah, it's like we're on autopilot most of the time. You remember that leaky bucket analogy? That really hit home for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's such a perfect image of how we waste energy chasing after stuff, trying to fill that bucket that never stays full.
But the idea is to become the well, right?
Yeah.
The source of that never-ending energy. But how do we do that? Like, practically speaking, how do we practice this Vitark thing and actually become the well?
Well, I think Vitark is about cultivating a different kind of attention. Instead of always looking outward, we got to learn to direct our minds inward. It's less about analyzing and more about observing, just noticing what's going on inside without judgment.
So instead of getting all tangled up in our thoughts and trying to control everything, we learn to watch them come and go.
Yeah, like watching clouds drift by, you know.
Okay, I can picture that.
And it's also about recognizing we have a choice. We get to decide which thoughts we engage with and which ones we let pass, like Fareed and the golden scissors.
Right. He chose the needle and thread because he was more interested in putting things back together.
Instead of cutting them apart. So instead of using our minds to like dissect everything, we can use them to create a sense of wholeness inside.
And that's what leads to peace, right? Letting go of that need to analyze and fix everything.
Exactly. We create space for that natural well-being to come through. And I think that's where Lokanda Samadhi Sukham comes in, that bliss of simply existing. It's just being present with what is, you know?
Being present. It sounds so simple, but in reality, it's so hard. So how do we experience this joy? Is it something we can, like, learn to do, or does it just happen?
That's a great question. I don't think the lecture lays out a step-by-step guide, but it does give us some clues.
Okay, like what?
It all goes back to those key things we keep talking about: wonder, stillness, and discernment. These aren't just one-time things, they're ongoing practices. They can help us change how we see ourselves and the world.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. It's about evolution, not some end goal. And as we work on those three things, that inner joy becomes more and more accessible. It's like we're clearing a path.
Removing the obstacles, so to speak.
Yeah, and the lecture talks about how important self-knowledge is, understanding who we are beyond our thoughts, our emotions, our roles.
So Vitark isn't just about thinking differently, it's about self-discovery too.
Absolutely. Peeling back those layers to reveal the peace and joy that's already there inside.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. Who we are, it's not fixed.
Right.
It's always changing.
You got it. It's a process of becoming. And that's where the real adventure lies.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It's not just about finding happiness, it's about this ongoing transformation, this journey.
And the Shiva Sutras, this ancient wisdom, it gives us the tools to navigate that journey. It's not about escaping from the world, but like engaging with it in a whole new way.
I love that. But let's be real, life gets in the way, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually put all this into practice when we're busy and stressed?
That's the real test, isn't it? And the lecture reminds us that it's not about being perfect, it's about trying, making small, consistent efforts to cultivate wonder, stillness, and discernment.
Okay, so baby steps. Progress over perfection.
Exactly. So it could be something as simple as taking a few deep breaths during the day, or like pausing to really appreciate the beauty around us, or choosing to respond to tough situations thoughtfully instead of just reacting. It's those little mindfulness things that can really add up.
Those are great examples. But what about those really tough times, when you feel overwhelmed or lost? How do these principles help then?
That's where that Swapat Shakti comes in. The power that comes from connecting with that inner source. Remember, it's like finding an anchor in a storm.
Right, the wellspring.
Exactly. And this lecture suggests that by connecting with that, we can tap into a strength we didn't even know we had.
It's like this ancient wisdom is giving us a practical roadmap to navigate the ups and downs of life.
It is, with more grace and ease and hopefully more inner peace.
You know what? It makes you wonder, if this wisdom has been around for thousands of years, why is it just now gaining traction? Why are people paying attention?
It's a good question. Maybe it's because we're craving meaning and connection in a world that feels chaotic. Or maybe it's just that more and more people are looking for answers beyond the material stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a hunger for something deeper.
And maybe this ancient wisdom is showing us the way, helping us find that deeper meaning inside ourselves and in our connection to everything around us.
It's not about rejecting the modern world, it's about finding a better way to be in it, right? With more awareness and peace.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message.
I keep coming back to this idea of the joy of existence being unconditional. I was like, whoa, it really changes how you think about happiness.
It really does. We're so used to happiness being tied to something,
Yeah.
Our relationships, our successes, the things we have. It's like we're always saying, I'll be happy when, and then there's always that condition, that when.
When I get that promotion, when I find the right person, when I finally buy that house, it's like this endless cycle. But this lecture is saying there's a completely different kind of happiness, one that doesn't depend on any of that stuff. So where does it come from? How do we find it?
That's where that inner journey comes in. Those key things we've been talking about, wonder, stillness, and discernment. When we start cultivating those, we tap into something deeper. It's not about adding something new. It's more like uncovering something that's already there, buried under all the clutter.
Like peeling back the layers to reveal what's underneath.
Exactly. It's like polishing a diamond that's been covered in dust. And the Shiva Sutras say that who we are at our core, that essence, it's pure joy, pure awareness, pure bliss. It exists beyond all the ups and downs of life and what our minds tell us.
I mean, that's a powerful thought. But how do we know if we're really experiencing that pure bliss or just kidding ourselves? It seems kind of out there.
That's where that vitark we talked about comes in, discernment. It helps us tell the difference between those short-lived, surface-level pleasures and that deeper, more lasting joy. And it's not about saying no to pleasure. It's more about being aware of the different kinds of happiness we feel.
So being more mindful of the choices we make, the experiences we go for, savoring the things that really nourish us instead of always chasing those quick hits of pleasure.
That's it. Think about it. Enjoying a great meal is different from the joy you feel connecting with someone you love, which is different from that bliss of just being in this moment. There are so many shades of happiness, but we often just lump them all together.
That's so true. We don't even stop to appreciate the subtle differences.
And the Shiva Sutras, they're like, hey, become a connoisseur of happiness.
A connoisseur of happiness. I love that.
Learn to appreciate those subtle nuances. Discover what truly feeds your soul.
It's like we have this whole palette of happiness available, but we're always reaching for the same few colors.
Right. There's a whole world of joy out there to explore. And as we become more aware, we start making choices that really support our well-being, choices that align with what truly matters to us.
So it's not about following a bunch of rules. It's about using this wisdom to find our own path to a more joyful life.
Exactly. The Shiva Sutras are tools for self-discovery, not a rigid set of beliefs. They're like an invitation to explore who we are, to experiment, to play, and to figure things out for ourselves. What works for you might not work for me, and that's okay.
Wow, this has been incredible. I feel like we've only scratched the surface, but my whole perspective has shifted. It's amazing how these ancient teachings can still be so relevant today.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, right? They shake things up a bit, expand our awareness, and help us see ourselves and the universe in a new light.
And open us up to new possibilities, to living a richer, more fulfilling life. To all our listeners out there, here's a thought to take with you. If true happiness comes from within, what's one small thing you could do today to cultivate a little more wonder, stillness, or discernment in your life? What would it look like to become a connoisseur of your own happiness? Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.
Please like, share and subscribe.